If you want to get up-leveled as a software engineer, you need to show the capacity to handle more scope. Maybe you're in a position where most of your career you've been taught, you've gone through the ranks of junior and you're at mid-level now. They're probably hiring people beneath you, and that's an opportunity for you to start teaching them. But it's really important that the people above you notice that you're good at giving that support, because when it comes to promotions opening up, they're going to be looking at the cost of the members that they can promote. If you're somebody that they know needs training to deal with other people on your team so that you can show them the ropes, then you're less likely to be picked over a candidate who's already helping everybody on their team, shows an aptitude for teaching people. So in this video, I'm going to go over the core principles of how you can start mentoring people on your team so you can be at the top of that list when it comes to promotion. We're going to cover why you need to stop giving away the answer, how to be engaging even when what you're teaching is boring, and how to balance theory against practice. So when teaching, you should always hook before you give away the punchline. If you think back through the different teachers and mentors that you've had throughout your life, you can probably split the groups of good versus bad with a pretty simple test, and that is, are those people just giving you the answer straight away, or are they giving you the tools so you can find a solution yourself? You've probably come across this with ChatGPT, where you can find answers really quickly that are bespoke to your problem. And maybe you type in the question and it just immediately spits out the pattern and you copy and paste it and suddenly it's working. But you don't really understand how the pattern fit in and why it works in the context that it does. Because you've been given the answer without having to work it out yourself and you haven't made the connection that you need. And I guarantee that the next time that problem comes up, you're going to have to ask again, how do I solve this? Because you never solved it. It was solved for you. Think like a comedian. So when a comedian tells a joke, there's the hook, the setup, where they prepare you for the punchline instead of just going straight in, because the punchline wouldn't make sense outside of context. And it's exactly the same with teaching. If you just skip straight to the punchline and say, here it is, the answer, the person hasn't come away with anything. But if you can lead them without showing them, that's where the learning's going to happen. And they're going to appreciate it a lot more. People want a challenge. And if you can give it to them as a challenge, even better. So for example, I had a pull request not too long ago where I'd implemented a piece of functionality that would have been better suited to the memento pattern, and I'd never heard of this pattern. So instead of just immediately saying this should be a memento pattern and commenting some quick implementation, the senior who was doing my PR simply said, is there a behavioral pattern that would make this any better? And so I flicked through some of my old Obsidian notes and realized, oh yeah, actually, this could be done better with the memento pattern. Naturally, he already knew what the right implementation was, but I actually had to go and find it for myself. So the next time I'm coming up with a similar solution, that thought process is already solidified. Also, I've had to flick through my other patterns as well to find it, so they're going to be more fresh in my memory. The next problem that you need to work on is actually being engaging while teaching. Say that it's not something that the person can just straight away pick up and go ahead. You need to actually give them some fundamental business knowledge or help them upskill because it's quite a jump to the next level. Well, I think we take for granted things that are simple to us because we've been doing them. So your immediate response might be to be reluctant about helping the person. And by setting the tone like that, immediately that person's going to be less interested in what you have to say because you're not that interested in having to tell them. You want to see this as an opportunity to get better at teaching, and if you can get better at teaching, that's going to help you long term in your career. Like, imagine that one of your long term goals is to be a manager. Well, you're going to struggle being a manager if you can't communicate ideas to people. So be excited about the fact that this is something that's helpful, and also what you're teaching them. Try and be excited about that. At work, I manage the automation tests for my department, and what we wanted to do with it has basically exceeded what one person can do. So I've had to onboard somebody who has no familiarity with the testing tools that we use, nor the architecture that I've set up. There's documentation for it, which I could have just sent them the documentation and said, that's what you need to read, and then we'll re-meet and go ahead. But I was like, no, we'll book in a meeting, we'll go over the documentation together, and then we'll pair program until you feel confident enough to take over. And for me to get through the theory actually took about an hour. We could have just sat there and read through line by line, and the other guy, to be honest, probably would have fell asleep. So instead, I tried to have a laugh with it. I didn't take it too seriously. I made jokes about the holes in the architecture, and I pointed out the strong parts that I was proud of and said, look, well, actually, to be fair, I reckon you can make a big difference here. I try to actually build some momentum, have some reason to keep engaged and to stick it through to the end, because at the end of the day, we both have to do it. It's our job. You can either do it and hate it or do it and enjoy it. And well, I'd rather be enjoying what I'm doing because it's how we spend most of our time. If you're working 8 hours a day, that's most of your waking hours. Right, so I mentioned there that I did one lecture and then some pair programming. You've got the big question of, well, how do you divide your time between theory, pair programming, and then letting the person go out on their own? I mean, when I write solo here, I mean, you know, they're doing the majority of the work and they might be asking you a question every hour or two just because they're new. I'd immediately cut down the theory to be as bare bones as possible. If you're teaching them, say, a new architecture, we just want to give them the fundamentals so that they can immediately dive in and start asking questions that we can answer. This should really only be 10% of your time. Now, we're probably busy people that can't be constantly engaged in literally sitting with the person and going over what needs to be done, because otherwise you're just going to massively throttle your own throughput. The whole point of a team is that you're all able to work on different things in parallel instead of just making everything concurrent. So you probably want to spend double. So in the cases that I've experienced, double works the best. So this is only 30% of their journey to becoming competent in the thing that you're teaching. Even if it's something that you think that after your theory they can just go away and work on it, just sit with them for a bit. You know, however long it took you to explain it, even if it's just a 5-minute explanation on something new, sit with them and say, let's walk through it now. Let's look at that area of the code. Let's check it out together, because then you're going to get all of those front-loaded, oh shit, I've forgotten that thing that you said about where was the class? What line was I looking at? Where was the example that you mentioned? You know, those questions are going to get out of the way pretty quickly if you just sit with them and say, let's have a crack together. Because once that's done and you think, right, okay, you seem to be moving in the right direction, just leave them to it. Step back and say, look, I'm a Teams call away, or you know where I'm sat in the office. Any questions you have, just come ask me. No problem. Because realistically, whatever you've managed to teach in that 30% of the time, imagine double that is probably how long it's going to take them to cement it for themselves. Maybe they're going to ask you, if this took 1 hour to teach the theory, 2 hours to pair program together, then maybe you're looking at 6 hours of them independently working on the thing to actually cement it themselves. I would expect probably hourly at least they'd be asking, which is a good thing. We want to encourage questions, because the quicker that they can do it by themselves, the faster that you then don't need to continue to support them. So to summarize, I think if you learn how to prompt things in such a way where you're just offering that little bit, that little snippet, okay, here's the problem, let's try and work out the solution, not here's the solution. And you're excited about it and genuinely interested, and you use this time allocation to help the person get on their feet, you're going to be noticed as somebody who is efficiently helping your team. And you might even start to get opportunities given to you because you become someone known who can explain things. And this can set you apart. There may be somebody who's far more technically competent, but because you're actually able to interact with people at a lower level than you, or who lack certain skills that you possess, you're able to bring them to the same level or above. That's going to look favorably to you over the person who's highly technically competent, but becomes an island of knowledge who can't share it. Now, another driving factor that makes you competent in teaching people is confidence. It can be quite nerve-wracking having to actually brain dump information and then guide somebody through. You need to have self-confidence for a start, but also you need to not get too anxious in the moment. And one of the things that gives you a sense of confidence is your personal fitness. Being strong and being healthy makes you confident. And it'll help you even further when it comes to pay negotiations and promotions, because you're going to walk into those scenarios with that confidence. So I've made this video here that gets you into basic muscle building, that gets you into basic resistance training principles. You can start building on that pyramid of health so you can be a more confident person. I hope that video helps. Cheers.